Hey, yo everyone, Andrew here, bringing you another video, and today we're going to be doing another edition of what I am thinking. Now, for those of you who are new to my channel and know nothing about this video series, it is exactly how it sounds. I sit down and I talk about what I am thinking. Now, it can be about anything. It can be about dogs and cats, the sun and the snow. It can be about anything. But chances are it's going to be something related to my channel. Something geeky related, like comic books, or video games, or movies, or television. And what am I thinking today? Well, today I'm going to be talking about the 6 titles that have just recently been canceled by DC Comics. My opinions on them being canceled, and cancelizations as a whole in comic books. Now, DC in the New 52, every so few months, cancels a certain amount of titles. Now, this is usually based on performance and sales, but it can also be based on whether or not the title works well in the DCU. They then bring in new titles to replace those titles so that they always have around 52 titles in their lineup, at least in the main DC 52 universe. Now, this is a very annoying process, but also it can be an exciting process because with as much bad and heartache that can come from it, a lot of excitement and, well, new chances and avenues open up. Now, first I'm going to talk about the 6 titles that are getting canceled and whether or not I care that they're getting canceled. Then I'm going to talk about the good and bad that comes from it, and also talk about how we as a community can solve the problem of some of the titles that we may or may not like, prevent them from getting canceled. Because as a comic book reader, the last thing I want is for a comic to get canceled. As much as I may harp on certain comics being good or bad, more or less bad, I still enjoy reading comics despite how bad they may be. I can almost sit down and read any comic and at least get some semblance of joy out of it. Unless the thing outright insults me in some way, shape, or form, I just like reading comics. So if I picked up Detective Comics this week and it turned out to be such a mediocre story, I still would have found something good about it and enjoyed it. So it does upset me when I hear a title get canceled because, well, I don't want titles to get canceled. I want to read The Adventures of Resurrection Man, even though it may not be as popular as Batman is going on. I want to know what happens to Static, even though the title may not be exactly what I want to see from the character or the atmosphere that's coming from it. So we might as well just jump into the titles that are getting canceled. 6 of the DC titles are getting canceled this go around. Savage Hawkman, Team 7, Fury of Firestorm, Deathstroke, Ravagers, and Sword Sorceries. A few of these titles were from the get-go, like Fury Firestorm, Deathstroke, and Savage Hawkman. Some of these titles came midway through the New 52, such as the Ravagers, and some of the titles are newer titles like Team 7 and Sword Sorcery. On the whole, I'm very disappointed that these titles are getting canceled because, well, they're all titles that I do read. Savage Hawkman and Deathstroke are titles that I thoroughly enjoy, despite whatever hiccups may come from them. I feel as though Deathstroke has really reached its stride with Justin Jordan being on the title, and the past 2 issues have been some of the best issues that have come from the comic. Savage Hawkman, although did have the hiccups here and there, especially in the early going, has also reached its stride. The storytelling has been good and interesting, and I feel as though the character is in a comfortable place, not only with the identity of the character, but also with the stories that can be told with them and the characters that have been introduced. Team 7 and Fury of Firestorm, I will admit, are comics that I read on the side. I don't get them the day they come out, but rather maybe a week or two later when I have a little bit of free time on my hands, but both of which are titles that I enjoy. Fury of Firestorm is a almost traditional superhero comic that takes the 2 Firestorms and bring them together in, well, a perfect marriage. Yeah, the villains can be a little iffy here and there, but Captain Atom just showed up in the comic in a nice little crossover, and Team 7 has been a really fun, edgy comic that tells about the history of the DC Universe 5 years ago, bringing in villains like Eclipso that we haven't really seen in the New 52 and giving them a nice shape up. It also gives us a chance to explore some of the past of other characters like Grifter and Amanda Waller and Deathstroke and Black Canary in different ways than we usually are used to them. And of course, then we have Sword of Sorcery and Ravagers, 2 comics that I have thoroughly enjoyed since their creation, with the Ravagers being a comic that I thought was never going to get off the ground, turned out to be my X-Men of the DC Universe, and Sword of Sorceries, which was a comic that a lot of people kind of gave up on before they even opened up the book, to turn out to be one of the more interesting plot, story-driven comics of the New 52. Yes, I'll admit Sword of Sorcery may not have the most interesting main character, but the art is great, the story is great, and the plot is great. So it does upset me greatly that these comics are getting canceled. And if I can have a moment just to sit out there and just say a message to the writers, artists, inkers, pencilers, anyone who's worked on these books, is that for ill or for good, I've really enjoyed your titles. I supported them, and I've had a good time reading them, all of them. And I can at least say openly and wholeheartedly, thank you. Because those titles were great titles. I am weeping the fact that Savage Hawkman is not going to be continued. I won't see if Shahira Hall will actually become Hawk Girl or Woman. I'm upset that I won't see what Deathstroke's next big hit is going to be, or what's going to happen in the world of Amethyst. Is she finally going to be able to defeat her aunt, or is she going to unify the multiple houses? It's upsetting to know that the Ravagers aren't going to be expanding. These runaway superhero teenagers that have nowhere to go really need to learn to survive on their own, or Team 7 not able to reveal any more of their secret history in the DEC universe. And let's not forget about Firestorm. I'm really curious to see where the book would go. Maybe make it a Brave and the Bold kind of book of the DCU. Every so issues he teams up with a different superhero. Whatever the case may be, I am upset that these comics are getting canceled. And like I said, wholeheartedly, I will say to the creators, the writers, and the people that have put all their time and effort into it, thank you. Now, as much as bad as comes from this, a few goods come from it too. What do you mean by goods? Yeah, there will be good coming from cancelizations. I always believe that if something bad happens, there has to be some underlying good that comes from it too. When a door closes, a window opens, or another door opens, or you just break the whole damn wall down. Something along that lines. Whatever the case may be, we do have a few things that are positive that comes from these cancelizations. One is that there's going to be a mix-up when it comes down to the writers. Certain writers from the books are going to be jumping onto other books. So, for example, Michael Allen Nelson will be taking over as Supergirl from Michael Johnson, while Tom DeFalco will be replaced by Justin Jordan, and Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray are both moving over to Batwing, which are big things. In addition to that, Sterling Gates will be taking over Justice League of America Vibes from Jeff Johns and Andrew Kersenberg. Yeah. So at least we know the writers that we have enjoyed throughout these comics are not going away, but just jumping onto other comics. And that allows some mix up. I feel as though comics like Batwing could really benefit from a heavy duty team such as Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray. Or Justin Jordan going on to Superboy might be just a thing that needs to happen to get the title going again. So there is at least some positive that comes from this. And then, of course, the other positive is that, well, other titles could be coming out. I could finally have the opportunity to have a Cyborg comic come out. Oh, I want it so bad. Make that the Brave and Bold comic. Every issue, Cyborg teams up with a different superhero. Or maybe have a Fourth World book with Grant Morrison and Alex Ross at the helm. Not going to happen, seeing that Alex Ross is primarily over at Dynamite and Grant Morrison is pretty much stopping comics, but who knows? I mean, you could have a Cyborg book, or a Cassandra Cain book, or maybe a Donna Troy book, or maybe a book dealing with the Outsiders, or maybe a Brave and the Bold book. Just a simple Brave and the Bold book. The opportunities are endless with the possibilities of 6 new spots opening up. Granted, we won't know what these 6 new titles are going to be until later down the line, but my brain is already trying to wrap around what they could possibly be. Who knows? Maybe Shazam might break away from being a backup story in Justice League and actually turn out to be a comic. How awesome would that be? Let me tell you, pretty damn awesome. Maybe later on I'll do another video talking about what titles should be jumped into the new 52. Maybe not because I've done it before, but it's always fun to kind of tinker around these ideas. So again, there might be at least a little good that comes over this, but is the good definitely worth the bad? Well, it comes from perspective. someone like me who has been invested in these comics and characters is, well, understandably upset. I'm sad that I won't be seeing these comics that I put forth a lot of time, money, and effort into enjoying. And I'm not saying it's like some kind of labor that I'm putting into or some sacrifice that I'm making to enjoy these comics. I enjoy these comics, but I do get invested in them. I get invested in stories all the times, whether it's movies, televisions, books, comic books, video games, or anything else for that matter. I just get invested into in the stories and the characters. And when I hear something end, it makes me a little bit worried and it gets me very upset. Now, some of you out there may have never given Sword of Sorcery a chance. And for that, I say that you are probably missing out, especially since the comic is getting canceled. But see, the thing is that shouldn't matter to you. You don't care. You didn't read the book. So for you, these cancelizations could be perfectly fine. I mean, the comics are getting canceled because they're not making sales. And that brings me to the conclusion of this. What can we do as readers to keep comics from getting canceled? Because I'm sure maybe you out there, John, I just freaked out all the Johns out there, but John, you're probably sitting there saying, well, I like Hawkman, but I just don't have the money to read it. Well, that's fine and good. But the reason why comics get canceled is because we're so focused on buying the X-Men or the Avengers or the Batman or the Justice League titles that are out there. The popular titles, let's be honest in here, if you put X in front of anything over in Marvel or Batman in front of anything in DC, it's going to sell. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but DC and Marvel are companies that are looking to stay afloat. They can't necessarily put products out there that aren't selling. To the point that they're not reaching break even and that they're actually going to be losing money on these titles. But it's not from lack of interest. I'm sure a general amount of you are probably actually interested in reading Deathstroke or giving Sword of Sorcery a chance, but you're not going to do it because you're too focused on getting the Batman, the Supermans, the Wolverines, the Spider-Man titles that are out there. And it is a bit unfair because there are like 5 Batman titles, 16 X-Men titles, and 3 Spider-Man titles. I think there's 3 now. Amazing got canceled, so there's Superior and Avenging. But the fact of the matter remains is there's so many titles of the other characters that are popular because those titles sell. Take, for example, Batman the Dark Knight. The title sucked when it first came out. It's a great title now. It's actually really enjoyable, and I really like what Greg Kurtz is doing with the comic, but it sucked when it came out. But the title sold like a madman. Why? Because Batman was in the title. Hell, I'm thinking that you can almost pull out any comic and just put Batman in the title and make it work. And I'm the biggest Batman fan out there, but I'll admit that's still pretty ridiculous. What if you brought out Hawkman featuring Batman on it? People are going to buy it. Why? Because Batman's in the title. It's kind of a comfort zone for people. If it's that they're afraid to go into things that they're not necessarily used to. I'm the opposite. I like to venture into the unknown, to try things out that I never tried before because you never know if you're going to like it. And that almost always happens with me. Is that I'll try something that I didn't know if I'm going to like or not and turn out loving it. So, what I say to you guys is this. The reason why these comics are getting canceled is because, well, these comics are not selling. So, what's a way for you guys to have these comics sell? Well, give at least one of them a chance. I know not everyone has money to go out there to buy the ridiculous amount of titles that I buy. And I'm not saying I'm in any way, shape, or form rich. My only vice is comic books. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't go out and party. I buy comics. That's my vice. But what I say is this. Say you have a 5 comic limit. Have 4 of those comics be comics that you absolutely must get. The Batman, the X-Men, the Spider-Man, the Justice League of your list. And then save that last spot for maybe a comic that you're not sure about. You don't have to stick through to the end if you don't like it. But say if you give Savage Hawkman a chance and it doesn't quite work out the way it is, give Deathstroke a chance or give Dial H a chance or Red Lanterns. Something that you wouldn't expect to like or that you know nothing about and just, well, give it a chance because you never know. It might turn out to be one of your favorite comics. So that's really the conclusion of this. Is that, yes, I'm upset these comics are getting canceled. Yeah, there is an underlying good that can come from it. New comics and possibilities and the mix up of creators on different comics. But at the same time, this really could have been prevented from people reading the comics. And I can understand that some of those comics did start off a bit rocky, such as Savage Hawkman. Nothing against Tony Daniels' writing on Savage Hawkman, but it wasn't the most desirable thing that came out of the New 52 at first. But Hawkman eventually grew to be a good title. I could still understand why people didn't pick it up because of the negative reaction they had beforehand, but Sword of Sorcery isn't getting picked up at all, and it turns out to be one of the best new titles that comes out of the third wave it came from. I thoroughly enjoyed that title. I thought it was a great comic, and it's only hitting its fourth issue, and already it's getting canceled. Now, at the same time, we can at least have some solace in knowing that these characters are going somewhere else. We know that Hawkman is going to be on Justice League, and that Amethyst is going to jump over to Justice League Dark or something like that. Like, who knows, Destro could join the Suicide Squad. These characters aren't going away, but it's still sad not seeing them in their own adventures. I'm going to end this video review here, and this kind of what I am thinking. I just kind of wanted to vent that. Again, this isn't necessarily a rant, but more or less an analysis of what we can do as comic book fans to keep comic books alive. So what do you think? How do you feel about these cancelizations? And on a whole, are you upset? Are you happy? Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? I'm interested to hear. So with that said, I'm going to end this review here. This is Andrew saying peace out for now.